When we think of famous historic royal couples, we usually picture grand weddings, lavish ceremonies, and enduring partnerships like that of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. But what about when the people at the top fall in love with each other in ways that go against the grain of society's expectations? The relationship between kings and queens has always been more complicated than just "I love you, you love me." And in this series, we have explored many of the ways in which this has played out throughout history. But now it is time to look at the forbidden royal romances that were kept secret, sometimes with deadly consequences. Join us as we delve into the hidden world of royal love affairs and uncover the shocking truths about Europe's most powerful monarchs and their secret desires. Starting with Edward II of England. When Edward II took the throne of England in 1284, he was a young and inexperienced monarch. However, soon after his coronation, he began engaging in a series of questionable activities that would lead to his downfall. One of the first things he did was to form a close relationship with Piers Gaveston, a young nobleman who had previously been employed as a soldier in Edward's household. While there was no official record of their relationship, chroniclers and poets of the time described it as deeply intimate. Edward showered Gaveston with gifts and honors, including making him Earl of Cornwall, a prestigious title usually reserved for the king's eldest son. However, these actions sparked outrage among the English nobility, who saw Gaveston as a threat to their power and influence. They accused Edward of nepotism and treason, and demanded that he end his relationship with Gaveston. Despite the pressure, Edward refused to break off his relationship with Gaveston, and the situation escalated quickly. The barons revolted and forced Edward to agree to a treaty that exiled Gaveston from England. But the king immediately broke the terms of the agreement and reinstated Gaveston, leading to another rebellion. This time the barons seized control of the government and forced Edward to sign a document known as the Dictum of Rothley, which barred him from ever marrying Gaveston and stipulated that the two men should live separately. However, Edward continued to defy the terms of the agreement, and in 1311, he was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, Edward III. Soon after, he was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, where he died under mysterious circumstances. Some historians believe that he was bludgeoned to death by order of his own son, who wanted to secure his claim to the throne. But next, let's look at King James I at first glance. The relationship between King James I of England and his close companion, George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham, might seem like a mere example of close friendship. But a closer look at the language used by both men reveals a deeper level of intimacy. Many historians argue that the relationship between James and Buckingham was actually romantic in nature. James showered Buckingham with expensive gifts, praised his beauty and writings, and referred to him as his intimate friend. Buckingham reciprocated these gestures by defending the king passionately in public and displaying a similar level of physical closeness. This relationship was scandalous at the time, as it was widely believed that homosexual relationships were sinful and unnatural. As a result, many members of the court and the general public mocked and ridiculed James and Buckingham, causing a rift in the court and making James unpopular. However, despite the criticism, James continued to elevate Buckingham to positions of power, making him Duke of Buckingham and granting him control over several important royal estates. Unfortunately, this relationship came to an abrupt end. When Buckingham was executed in 1628 on charges of treason, some historians believe that James ordered the execution as part of a plot to marry one of Buckingham's former mistresses, while others believe that Buckingham's growing power and influence simply became too much for James to tolerate. Whatever the true reason, the execution of Buckingham was a tragic end to a relationship that had captivated and scandalized the court of King James I. Now, let's take a look at Frederick the Great. Frederick the Great, King of Prussia from 1740 to 1786, is remembered as a brilliant military strategist and an enlightened despot, but behind the image of the powerful ruler, there was a man deeply scarred by the execution of his close friend, a man he loved dearly. At the age of 17, Frederick was arranged to marry the daughter of the Austrian emperor. However, he fell in love with one of his groomsmen, a dashing young man named Cat. Together they enjoyed horseback riding, theater performances, and long walks in the gardens of the palace. But their idyllic romance was shattered when Frederick's father, the King of Prussia, discovered their relationship and sentenced Cat to death on charges of sodomy. Frederick, who had hoped that his father would be more lenient, was devastated by the execution and retreated into himself. He abandoned his plans to marry and dedicated his life to his kingdom, throwing himself into his work as a military leader and reformer. He surrounded himself with men who shared his interests and kept women at arm's length, though he never publicly acknowledged Cat as his lover. Frederick's grief-stricken reaction to his death and his lifelong commitment to his friend's memory are evidence of the depth of their relationship. The execution of Cat had a profound impact on Frederick's personality and reign, shaping him into a brilliant but isolated ruler. Now let's focus on Richard the Lionheart. Richard the Lionheart was a legendary medieval warrior, famous for his bravery in battle and his chivalrous conduct. But what is less known is his close relationship with Philip II of France, a contemporary monarch who was both a rival and an ally. During the Third Crusade in the Holy Land, Richard and Philip fought side by side against the forces of Saladin, the Muslim leader of the Ayyubid dynasty. They led their armies in siege warfare, most notably at the Siege of Acre, where they fought for months to capture the city. Despite being rivals on the battlefield, Richard and Philip developed a close bond, sharing meals together and sleeping in the same tent. Chroniclers of the time describe their relationship as being like that of David and Jonathan, characterized by deep affection and loyalty. When Philip returned to France, Richard missed his company and wrote him heartfelt letters expressing his longing for his friend. Although there is no concrete evidence that Richard and Philip were lovers, the intensity of their relationship was unusual for the time period and has led to speculation about the nature of their bond. Some historians argue that the medieval concept of courtly love, which emphasized intense emotions and idealized the beloved, could have applied to Richard and Philip's relationship, suggesting that their bond may have had romantic undertones. Ultimately, the true nature of their relationship remains a mystery, but their close companionship is a fascinating aspect of the medieval world and challenges traditional views of masculinity and kingship in that era. Now let's talk about Louis XIII. Louis XIII of France, who reigned from 1610 to 1643, was a troubled monarch known for his volatile temper and erratic behavior. Despite being married to Maria Theresa of Austria and having several children, Louis became infatuated with a young man named Henry de Lau, a member of the French nobility who served at court as a valet and later as a military officer. The two men shared a close relationship, engaging in hunting trips and intimate dinners, with rumors of their relationship spreading throughout the court. However, Louis's counselors grew concerned about de Lau, believing that he was gaining too much influence over the king. Despite their protests, Louis continued to promote de Lau, giving him titles and positions of power. As de Lau's influence grew, so did the resentment of the French nobility, who saw him as an upstart and a threat to their way of life. This tension eventually boiled over when Cardinal Richelieu, the powerful minister of France, had de Lau arrested on charges of treason. During the trial, it was revealed that de Lau had been involved in a plot to assassinate the cardinal, along with several members of the French nobility. De Lau was found guilty and executed, while the conspirators were either imprisoned or fled the country. The scandal of the affair and the execution of de Lau tarnished Louis's reputation and contributed to the decline of his dynasty. And finally, let's talk about Louis XIV. Louis XIV of France, the longest reigning European monarch in history, was known for his extravagant lifestyle and numerous mistresses. However, rumors have persisted about the paternity of his oldest surviving legitimate child, Louis XV. These rumors suggest that the real father of Louis XV was not the previous king, Louis XIII, but instead the king's older brother, Philip.